Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into Chapter 6, The Lens of Truth. We're talking about the absolute intellectual mastery it takes to tell the difference between lookalikes. To help us out, we're heading back into the metaphorical digital void with our conceptual guide, Salem, and his neon-shaded camel, Jassas. Now, I know it sounds a bit like sci-fi, but it's actually the perfect framework for a very real, very complex problem. How on earth do we tell the difference between things that look identical and equally beneficial on the outside, but are completely at odds at their core? Well, let's get into it. Here's the roadmap for our ascent today. We'll be hitting 6 key stages. First, the illusion of sameness. Second, the lens of truth. Third, trade versus usury. Fourth, purpose and reasoning. Fifth, the summit of Wasatya. And finally, a complete humanity. Starting with Section 1, the illusion of sameness. We're beginning our climb in a place where mirages of logic regularly trick the untrained eye. Think about this for a second. If two actions look identically golden on the outside, are they truly the same on the inside? This right here is our core problem. If you rely purely on formal identity logic, the kind of thinking that just stares at static surface-level traits, you might look at two actions and think, yep, exactly the same. You judge them by their shape or what they do right this second. But the sources are flashing huge warning signs about this. Just because two things shine doesn't mean they're both gold, right? When we just take things at face value, we become incredibly vulnerable to intellectual and moral mirages. Which brings us to Section 2, the lens of truth. To actually survive this harsh environment and not get duped by those mirages, Salem powers up his radiant cyan visor. We're calling this our lens of truth. In the source texts, this lens is actually known as al-furuq, which literally translates to distinctions. This is a highly sophisticated Islamic jurisprudential science built to differentiate between seemingly identical cases, masterfully established by Imam al-Qarafi. We absolutely need this kind of structured critical tool, otherwise we risk confusing what is incredibly toxic with what is genuinely beneficial. It literally trains the mind to spot those hidden cracks between concepts that are just masquerading as twins. But, it goes even deeper than that. The sources introduce this concept called Barzakian logic. Think of it like a dynamic synthesis. It's where two opposing poles interact to create a higher third state. It totally shatters the static, rigid nature of traditional formal logic. So it's not just about spotting simple differences, it's about seeing an entirely fluid dimension of meaning that integrates really complex realities. Instead of just stopping at A is not B, Barzakian logic lets us understand the dynamic, living relationship between them. It gives us a much more accurate map of reality. Moving into Section 3, trade versus usury. Let's look at exactly how this logic plays out in a real-world scenario. Imagine you're out in that desert and you stumble upon two glowing golden cubes. They look totally identical. On paper, they both generate a profit. But a deep scan with our lens of truth reveals a massive fundamental clash. On one hand, you have trade, or mubadala, which is the mutual exchange of real goods and value. On the other hand, you have usury, or al-riba, which is just money artificially generating more money without any real production or shared risk at all. One is a dynamic, real contribution that pumps value through society. The other is just a predatory illusion that sucks it dry. All right, Section 4, purpose and reasoning. Let's slice these concepts wide open and see what's really making them tick. To genuinely see what's going on inside, the lens relies on two critical concepts from the sources, illa and maqsid. Illa is basically the underlying reasoning, or the direct mechanical cause of a ruling. Maqsid, however, is the ultimate overarching purpose, the real intended goal of the action. The lens of truth doesn't just stop at what is happening, it demands to know why it's happening, and to what ultimate end. Because honestly, without grasping both the mechanism and the goal, you just can't accurately judge an action. When we put these two side by side, the contrast is just wild. Take trade. The illah, the mechanism, is mutual exchange, and the ultimate maqsad is preserving and growing real wealth for society. But look at usury. The mechanism is predatory extraction, and the ultimate result? It actually destroys wealth preservation, triggering societal conflict and massive inequality. See, the exteriors are identical. They both give you a return, but one builds humanity up, while the other literally cannibalizes it from the inside out. And this brings up a huge red flag in the texts. The danger of hiyar, or legal loopholes. These are basically tricks that keep the outward appearance of legality while completely violating the spirit of the law. A perfect example is invalid tawarruk. On paper, it's a financial instrument structured to look exactly like a standard trade, but the end result functions exactly like usurious debt. It completely circumvents the true maqsid. The sources are so clear about this. You cannot use the letter of the law to destroy the purpose of the law. The lens of truth just automatically rejects actions that defeat their own intended purpose. Which leads us to Section 5, the Summit of Wasatiyah. After pushing through all these complex mirages and loopholes, we finally reached the peak of this philosophical climb. Now we need to redefine a concept you probably think you already know. Far too often, we treat moderation like it's a weakness, right? Like it's just some watered-down mathematical compromise between two strong ideas. But the sources define wasatiyah as the ultimate intellectual high ground. It is an active, towering peak that sees exactly what the extremes, whether that's rigid materialism on one side or unchecked mysticism on the other, simply cannot see. It's actually the hardest position to hold because it demands constant active balancing. There's a brilliant quote from Ibn Taymiyyah's philosophy that perfectly captures the sheer courage you need at this summit: allegiance to truth, not to the tribe. It's entirely about choosing objective reality and proper methodology over blind partisan loyalty. And let's be real, in our modern world, that is incredibly tough. You aren't just sitting passively in the middle trying to make everyone happy. You are actively aligning with the truth, no matter which side it happens to come from. It requires serious intellectual honesty. And finally, Section 6, a complete humanity. Looking out from this peak, we finally see how all these pieces fit together. By using Barzakian logic, we can actually integrate multiple sources of knowledge into one complete human experience. We're uniting bodily intelligence with spiritual intelligence. We're balancing human reason with divine revelation. And we're aligning our fitra, that innate primordial nature that intuitively knows the truth, with external reality. It's this beautifully interactive living system. It creates a full, thriving human consciousness, and it steers us safely away from the really destructive pitfalls of extreme ideologies. I want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative thought from the texts. True mastery is the unity of the self and knowledge, seeing the creator behind the created without negating it. True mastery is the unity of witnessing, seeing the deep reality right there behind the surface. So my question for you is this: are you using the lens of truth in your own life to look past the surface? Are you settling for those comfortable illusions of sameness, or are you actually striving for that active, towering summit of wasatiyah? Keep looking for the truth beneath the surface. Thanks for joining me on this explainer.